The storm finally broke overnight, and by morning our whole neighborhood looked like something off a holiday card. Every roof, driveway, and lawn buried under a thick, clean blanket of snow. Kids were out throwing snowballs before breakfast was even finished. Neighbors were shoveling sidewalks and waving at each other across the street. It was the kind of morning that made you forget, briefly, that HOA drama existed at all. I decided to skip the chores for a few hours and do something more fun with all that fresh snow. I started building a snowman. What began as a casual weekend project escalated fast. By early afternoon, I had something towering nearly 8 feet tall beside my driveway. Carrot nose, cold buttons, long stick arms reaching out toward the street, like it was waving at passing cars. It was, without exaggeration, the best snowman I'd ever built. People noticed. Neighbors stopped to take pictures. Kids dragged their parents over for a closer look. For an afternoon, my driveway became the unofficial neighborhood attraction, and honestly, it felt good to give people something to smile about in the middle of winter. Not everyone felt that way. Karen lived across the street, and Karen was our HOA president. The kind of HOA president who noticed a crooked mailbox from 2 blocks away and filed a complaint before lunch. The moment she spotted my snowman, I watched her expression change in real time. She marched across the street, arms crossed, and informed me it needed to come down immediately. According to her, it was too large. It damaged the community's aesthetic. I pointed out calmly that it was sitting entirely on my property and violated exactly 0 HOA regulations. That answer didn't go over well. After several increasingly heated minutes, she stormed off, throwing out a vague threat about further action before disappearing back across the street. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong about that. 2. Over the next several days, Karen developed what could only be described as a fixation. She started driving past my house multiple times a day, slowing noticeably every time she reached my driveway, staring at the snowman like it had personally wronged her. Neighbors picked up on it fast. A few even joked that she seemed to be spending more time monitoring my front yard than running actual HOA business. Meanwhile, the snowman kept doing what it had been doing from day one, making people happy. Families stopped for photos. Kids waved at it like it was a character at a theme park. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed delighted by it. Everyone except Karen, whose frustration was visibly compounding by the day. A few mornings later, I happened to be standing at my front window when I saw her red SUV coming down the street. Something about it looked off immediately. She was moving faster than usual, and instead of holding the center of the road, the vehicle started drifting toward my property. I assumed she'd correct course. She didn't. She accelerated. The SUV left the road entirely and cut across the snowy edge of my lawn, aimed directly at the snowman. Several neighbors were outside and saw the whole thing unfold in real time. Before anyone could process what was happening, her bumper made contact. A massive cloud of displaced snow exploded into the air, swallowing the entire impact from view for a few seconds. Then came the sound, a deep, unmistakable crunch that echoed down the street and brought half the block out onto their porches. When the snow cleared, Karen was standing beside her SUV, visibly stunned. The front bumper was badly crumpled. The vehicle had come to a dead stop, clearly having hit something far more solid than packed snow. That's because it had. What Karen didn't know, what nobody driving past would have known, was that the lower half of my snowman wasn't just snow. Years before any of this, there had been an old tree stump sitting in that exact spot on my property, weathered and solid, never removed because it had never bothered anyone. When I built the snowman that weekend, I'd simply packed the snow around it for extra structural support. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't a trap. It had been sitting there in plain sight long before the first snowflake of that storm ever fell. Karen's SUV had just collided directly with a decades-old hardwood stump wearing a very convincing snow costume. Neighbors gathered fast. Some looked genuinely shocked. A few weren't even trying to hide their laughter anymore. Karen, recovering her composure, immediately pointed at me and accused me of deliberately building a trap to damage vehicles. I reminded her, evenly, of the one detail that mattered most. Nobody had told her to drive off the road and into my front yard. Sheriff's deputies arrived shortly after, responding to multiple 911 calls from witnesses who'd seen the entire thing happen. They walked the scene, interviewed neighbors individually, and documented everything, including the tire tracks carved into the snow, which told a story all on their own. The marks showed a clean, deliberate departure from the roadway, curving directly toward my driveway with no indication of skid, swerve, or loss of control beforehand. Every witness gave the same account. This wasn't an accident caused by icy roads or poor visibility. It was a deliberate decision to drive across private property and into a decoration that had been sitting there in plain view for days. After reviewing everything, the deputy on scene laid out the obvious legal reality. Homeowners are entitled to place decorations on their own property. Driving a vehicle into those decorations is an entirely separate matter, and the resulting damage is the responsibility of the driver, not the homeowner. Karen's accusations about a deliberate trap had nowhere left to go once the tire tracks and witness statements were on record. A tow truck arrived not long after to haul away her SUV. Karen stood on the sidewalk and watched it go, uncharacteristically silent. For someone who always had something to say about everyone else's property, she didn't have much to say about her own car at that moment. The story moved through the neighborhood faster than anything the HOA newsletter had ever managed to circulate. People talked about it for weeks, partly out of disbelief that anyone would actually drive into a snowman over sheer irritation, and partly, I think, because watching consequences arrive that quickly and that visibly is rare enough to be memorable. A few days later, I built a second snowman. Smaller this time, but it still drew smiles from people walking by. Karen never said a word about it. In fact, she started taking a different route down the street entirely, one that conveniently avoided my driveway altogether. Winter eventually settled into its normal rhythm. Kids kept playing in the snow. Neighbors kept shoveling their walks. The whole incident slowly folded into neighborhood legend, the kind of story people bring up years later at block parties. But it left behind a lesson that stuck with more than just Karen. Some people spend so much energy trying to control everything around them that they end up creating the very disaster they were trying to prevent. Karen wanted a tidier-looking street. What she got instead was a total bumper, a very public audience, and a tree stump that had been sitting quietly on my property the entire time, patiently waiting, as it turned out, for exactly this moment.